He woke up that morning just like any other, brushed his teeth, fed the cat, checked the weather through the frosted window and muttered, "Looks like a good day for a walk." He buttoned his cardigan slowly, fingers trembling slightly, more from age than from cold. And he stepped out into the morning light, into a world that hadn't changed, but something inside him had. That afternoon, while the sun poured lazily through the curtains, he sat down for a nap, and never woke up again. His neighbors said he looked perfectly fine that morning. His daughter had spoken to him the night before. He was cheerful, cracking jokes like always. There were no goodbyes, no warnings, just silence. And when the doctor later said it was sudden, they nodded. But inside, something didn't sit right. How could a life just vanish so quietly? Sudden death in the elderly feels like lightning on a clear day. No clouds, no thunder, no signs. Just a flash and it's over. But the truth is, there's almost always a countdown. A quiet, hidden ticking behind the ordinary, not the kind you hear. Not the kind your doctor always checks for. But a physiological, emotional, sometimes even spiritual unraveling. Whispering in subtle changes, forgotten symptoms and missed moments. It's not always the dramatic heart attack or the violent collapse we see in movies. Sometimes, it's the look in their eyes that's just a little dimmer, the breath that's slightly shallower, the nap that gets a little longer each day. But no one notices, because we've trained ourselves to believe that old age is a quiet fading, that it's normal to slow down, that it's expected to forget names, skip meals, or sleep more. We don't see these things as warnings. We see them as aging, and that's where the danger lies. This isn't fear-mongering. This is awareness, because knowledge is the only thing that stands between tragedy and prevention. Sudden death is not always sudden. Sometimes it's an ambush that we helped orchestrate with neglect, with assumptions, with silence. The question is no longer can we stop it. It's will we pay enough attention before it comes. Because for every elderly person who looked fine yesterday, there were signs, tiny cracks in the dam, whispers the body gave, but no one was listening. What if we could learn to listen? Not just with stethoscopes and tests, but with empathy, with presence, with wisdom. What if 5 hidden forces, 5 specific triggers, were behind most sudden deaths in the elderly? And what if they could be identified, even prevented? You're about to uncover those truths, not to live in fear, but to live fully, with open eyes and a prepared heart. Because life after 60 is not the beginning of the end. It's the final chapter of your masterpiece. And imagine walking through a forest. The trees are still, the breeze is gentle. You hear no threats, no growling, no rustling, just quiet. But beneath the leaves, coiled under the moss, something dangerous waits. Silent, still, lethal. That is how a silent heart attack begins. No chest-clutching drama, no screaming into the void, just a soft disruption, a whisper in the bloodstream. And most of the time, the person has no idea it even happened. In medicine, we call it a silent myocardial infarction. It sounds complex, clinical, distant, but it's not. It's the elderly woman who complains of fatigue and indigestion for a week. It's the grandfather who suddenly sleeps longer than usual and loses interest in food. It's the quiet man who feels a bit of pressure, not pain, just a little tightness in his chest and thinks, maybe I just overdid it walking the dog. But inside, the heart is screaming, blood flow is blocked, tissue is dying, the body is under siege and no one hears the alarm, not even the person living through it. You see, Hollywood lied to us. We were taught that a heart attack comes crashing in with drama and urgency. Sweat pouring down the face, someone gasping, clutching their chest, collapsing on the floor. But that's only one face of the monster. For many older adults, the signs are quiet. No pain at all, just fatigue, or mild nausea, or a sudden strange sense of anxiety. Sometimes the only clue is in the blood pressure. Sometimes it's in the heart rhythm. And sometimes, there's no clue until it's too late. The tragedy isn't just that it happens. It's that it happens silently, and we don't talk about it. In fact, Studies show that over 45% of all heart attacks in people over 65 are silent. Let that sink in, nearly half. And of those, the risk of sudden death skyrockets because the damage isn't discovered until the heart can't take it anymore. They seem okay, until the next fatal one hits, and no one connects the dots. Not the families, not even some doctors unless they're looking carefully. But here's the part they don't tell you. The body always leaves clues. It may not scream, but it speaks. The question is, are we willing to listen? Here's what to watch for, especially in someone over 60. A sudden drop in energy, even after rest. Shortness of breath doing simple tasks. A strange pressure or heaviness in the chest, back, or jaw. Unexplained sweating, cold or clammy skin. Mild nausea or stomach discomfort that seems to linger. A sense of doom or panic that appears without reason. These signs might seem small. They might not match what you've seen on TV. But in an aging heart, small signs often mean everything. We must begin to treat the elderly heart not as a ticking clock, but as a sacred bell. Each beat is precious. Each pause is a message. And when that bell begins to ring strangely, we must not wait until it falls silent. We must act, get the blood work, do the EKG, ask the hard questions, refuse to be dismissed by the phrase, "It's probably just age." Because just age is often how silent death hides in plain sight. The heart, even when silent, speaks of life. It whispers of years lived, laughter echoed, hands held, tears shed. And when it begins to stumble, it deserves more than silence in return. It deserves, what if your memories didn't vanish all at once? What if they left like guests at a fading party, one by one by one? First, the name of your neighbor, then the way home from church. Next, how to tie your own shoes. No bang, no crash. Just a slow, invisible theft. A quiet erasing of self. This is the cruelty of the mini-stroke, not a heart attack of the chest, but a heart attack of the mind. Doctors call them transient ischemic attacks, or TIAs. But don't be fooled by the word transient. It sounds harmless, even forgettable. What it really means is this: your brain just lost oxygen, not for hours, maybe just for minutes. But during those minutes, something precious disappeared. And most people, especially the elderly, don't even realize it happened. Picture a candle, a small, flickering light in the attic of your mind. Every time a mini-stroke strikes, the wind blows stronger, the flame dims, and one day, it goes out. But the tragedy is not just in the extinguishing. It's in the fact that no one was watching the flame. Mini-strokes don't always announce themselves. They don't knock you down like a thunderbolt. Instead, they play tricks. 1 minute, your grandmother is speaking clearly. The next, she's slurring her words just for a few seconds. You ask, "Did you feel okay?" She laughs it off. "Maybe I was just tired." Your grandfather's hand fumbles his fork. He forgets how to zip his coat. A moment later, he's fine. "Just a little stiff," he says. But the brain remembers. The brain knows it was starved. And each little episode leaves a bruise no X-ray can see, but one that shapes behavior, memory, personality. Here's the truth that rarely gets told. Mini-strokes are not minor. They are warnings, red flags before the storm. Each one increases the risk of a major stroke, the kind that paralyzes, silences, or kills within 90 days. That's right. You often have just weeks to act. And yet families miss it. Why? Because we are trained to look for collapse, not confusion. We're told strokes come with drama, but often they come disguised as forgetfulness, as just getting older. But what if we paid closer attention? What if we stopped brushing off? Sudden dizziness or balance problems, temporary slurred speech or trouble forming sentences, one-sided numbness that fades quickly, a sudden lapse in vision, even for just seconds. These aren't just senior moments. They are brain moments, and they matter, because the brain doesn't lose itself overnight. It goes in whispers, in pauses, in little forgotten places, unless we catch it, unless we intervene. You see, memory is not just storage, it's identity. It's the song of your life playing softly in the background. And a mini-stroke, is the hand that turns down the volume, one notch at a time, until you're left with silence. But silence is not inevitable. Not if we learn to listen to the mind's small cries for help. Not if we learn to treat forgetfulness not with dismissal, but with dignity. They say the body is mostly water, but what they don't say is that in old age the drought often comes quietly, not with thirst, but with confusion, fatigue, and death. For the elderly, dehydration is not just about forgetting to drink. It is the slow closing of the body's life force, a thief that takes without violence, just silence. You don't hear screams, you don't see pain, you see sleepiness, a little slurred speech, maybe even a stumble. You think they just need rest. But what they truly need is water. Here's the harsh truth. By the time thirst is felt in the elderly, it's already too late. The aging brain stops signaling thirst the way it used to. The kidneys lose their sharpness, filtering less, conserving less. The skin thins, evaporating fluids without warning, and medications like diuretics, blood pressure pills, laxatives pull even more moisture out, without even asking permission. What does dehydration really look like in an elderly person? A day of not eating much, a skipped glass of water, a hot afternoon with no AC, a mild illness that dries them from the inside out. Suddenly, the brain misfires. They seem off. They can't find the right words. They get dizzy when they stand. They fall. They sleep more. They stop speaking. And before you know it, they're in the hospital with low blood pressure, a failing kidney, or a heart struggling in a body without flow. We are rivers, flowing from birth, carrying nutrients, washing toxins, cooling heat. But when the river dries, life stagnates, organs suffocate, the mind cracks, the body crumbles. And death comes not with fire, but with the absence of flow. So how do you protect an elder from this dry death? You watch, you ask, you insist. Encourage small, frequent sips, not big gulps. Offer water-rich foods, cucumbers, melons, soups. Avoid sugary sodas and limit caffeine. Watch for dark urine, dry mouth, sunken eyes, and irritability. Remember, confusion in the elderly is not always dementia. Sometimes it's just dry neurons begging for water. In the final years of life, it's not always disease that takes us. It's neglect, not out of cruelty, but out of unawareness. Water is not just hydration, it is presence. It is consciousness, it is circulation, it is life. To give an elder a glass of water is not a small kindness. It is an act of preservation, a quiet life. It doesn't always start with a cough, not with a fever, not even with a pain. Sometimes death begins with nothing. But a glance, that doesn't quite focus. A hand that feels too warm. A silence in someone who used to hum softly to themselves. And deep inside the body, a fire begins to burn. Infections in the elderly are not loud. They don't always scream like they do in the young. They smolder, quietly, and by the time we notice the smoke, the flames have already taken hold. An infection in a young adult usually starts with a sign, a high fever, a sore throat, a runny nose, a red wound. But in seniors, that fever may never come. The immune system, tired from decades of battle, often fails to raise the alarm. And what we see instead is confusion, fatigue, a fall, a refusal to eat. This is why urinary tract infections, pneumonia, or even a mild case of the flu can spiral into sepsis within hours, because the warning signs were never loud enough to catch. The flame was invisible, but it was real, and by the time the elder looks a little off, their organs may already be struggling to survive. We often hear families say, "She was fine yesterday. He just seemed tired." And then suddenly, the ambulance, the ICU, the ventilator, the goodbye, not from cancer, not from stroke, but from a common infection that burned too quietly until the body was ashes on the inside. So how do we stop the invisible flame? With vigilance, with respect for the fragile internal balance of aging, and with attention to the subtle shifts that others ignore. Look for sudden confusion, unusual tiredness, loss of appetite, changes in urination, A strange shiver without fever. Don't wait for classic symptoms. Don't wait for the body to shout. Learn to listen when it whispers. Old age is a house of paper, weathered, delicate, still standing but vulnerable to sparks. And infection in the elderly is not just a medical event. It is a test of how well we watch over those who once watched over us. The fire doesn't have to win. A simple checkup, a basic test, an early antibiotic, a warm blanket of care can keep the flames from rising, because in the end, it's not about stopping every illness. It's about not letting small flames become funeral pyres. I didn't burn loudly. He reached for his glass of water, but his hand trembled, not from fear, not from weakness, but from a storm inside that he couldn't feel. His blood sugar was falling like dusk, quiet, unnoticed, and fast. When we think of diabetes, we think of sugar rising. But for many elderly people, the real danger is when sugar crashes. A drop so steep, so sudden. It silences the brain before the body can even react. This is hypoglycemia, and it doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just walks in and shuts the lights off. It can start with something simple, skipping a meal, taking a dose of insulin at the wrong time, exercising a little too much, or just not realizing the body's metabolism has changed again. In young people, the body fights back. It sends clear signals: shakiness, sweating, irritability, hunger. But in the elderly, the alarms are broken. The signs, soft, blurry, hidden. He looked confused, then drowsy, then his words slurred. And he slumped in his chair. His family thought he was tired, but his brain was starving. Sugar feeds every cell of the brain. When it's gone, the brain turns off the lights, and sometimes never turns them back on. Severe hypoglycemia can mimic a stroke. It can cause seizures, comas, even sudden death in sleep. And for those over 70, the margin between normal and too low is razor thin. One misstep in a medication schedule, one small misunderstanding, can be all it takes. But this doesn't have to happen. There is power in routine. There is wisdom in watching the body's patterns. And there is life in something as simple as a banana at bedtime, or a check of blood sugar before a walk. We don't need to fear the drop, only to respect its silence. In old age, the body speaks in whispers. The fall in sugar is not just a medical number. It's a symbol of how fragile the line is, between balance and collapse, between today and goodbye. And sometimes, all it takes to save a life is a snack, a reminder. Aging is not a countdown to an end. It is a call to live, not just longer, but deeper, not merely to add years, but to add meaning, purpose, and grace. Because life after 70 is not about racing against time. It's about embracing each moment as a gift, a fragile treasure entrusted to us. The triggers we've explored, the silent heart attacks, the invisible infections, the deadly sugar drops, they remind us of one profound truth. Our bodies are temples made of flesh and spirit, delicate yet resilient, demanding care and attention. But more than medicine, more than tests, what sustains us is the choice we make every day to cherish life, to listen deeply to our bodies, to honor the wisdom of aging. You may not control the years ahead, but you can control how you live them. By nurturing your body, yes. By feeding your mind, yes. But also by opening your heart to love, gratitude, and connection. And this is the real victory over sudden death. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just existing, but living deeply. If you found value in this journey, if these truths touch something within you, please hit that like button. Share your thoughts and stories below, because your voice matters. And don't forget to subscribe, to join a community where wisdom meets care. And every day is a chance to live better. Choose depth, choose presence. Choose to live not just longer, but richer, fuller, and with purpose. Because in the end, that's